Just before we get into this video, guys, as a constant reminder that I always put in front of these videos now, I want to get 10k by the end of the year, so if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and you'd be helping me out tremendously, and I'd love you forever. So I thought I haven't done one of my top 3 best and top 3 worst of the Doctors for a while, so I thought I would get into it, and I thought I'm going to take it back a little bit and I'm going to be like, let's talk about a Doctor who I've already spoke about in this series. As you may remember, a while ago I did the top 3 worst of the 4th Doctor's era. Well, today we are going to be doing Tom Baker's best, and I've got to say, I think this is probably going to be the hardest out of all of them. The reason being is Tom's era is just filled with some of the most iconic and best Doctor Who stories that we've ever had. So to narrow it down to a top 3 is ridiculously hard, and I've got to say, right up until the second that I pressed record on the camera, I still wasn't 100% sure on what I was actually going to say in this video. I think there's one in particular that people will expect to be on this list, and it 100% is. However, with the other 2, I think if you're a 4th Doctor era fan, you'll watch this video and you probably won't be happy, because you'll be like, well, what about that story? What about that story? I'll probably watch this back whilst editing and be like, I really wish I'd gone with a different one, to be fair. So as always, this is just my personal opinion. When I say top 3, it's not really in order. I just sort of talk about the 3 stories. But let's kick it off with The Seeds of Doom. Again, this is how quick this can just chop and change for me, because if you'd have asked me a year ago maybe, this probably wouldn't be here. The Seeds of Doom I think is interesting in the sense of it is a 6-parter that feels like it actually utilises the time that it's got. I think the problem with a lot of stories that are 6 and above parts is they do feel like they could shave off an episode or 2 in some cases. I don't get that with Seeds of Doom. I think every episode, obviously it's not constantly incredible, but I think those lull moments are very few and far between. When I look at everything about this story, it just screams, this is what I love about Doctor Who. The atmosphere, the locations in this story, and obviously I mean the sets as well. Whether it's like in the Antarctic, which is very The Thing, then of course you've got like this weird, almost jungle-like manor house, as well as all the grounds around it. You've got a fantastic supporting cast with the likes of John Challis as Scorby. Harrison Chase is one of the weirdest and creepiest Doctor Who villains, or human villains, that we've ever had. The Krynoid as a villain as well is incredibly strong. Admittedly, it doesn't always look great, and yes, sometimes they are just repainted axons. I think it's the end of either part 4 or 5. It's the one where it runs and that's the cliffhanger. It is just like a giant mattress is coming towards you, and it happens to have an anus on it as well, which is a bit random, but even though that does look a bit crap, you can let that slide because this story is just acted and written and directed incredibly well. I think in terms of performances, this is one of Tom's finest. I think he really excels as the Doctor in this story. Every aspect of the 4th Doctor that I love is way on display here. The music as well is very, very good. It's arguably one of my favourite soundtracks, and it's part of what I would say is one of my favourite seasons of all Doctor Who. I also love the fact that there's so much shit in here that people like Mary Whitehouse just went berserk over, but I think it's perfectly fine for Doctor Who. It does what I want to see from Doctor Who, where it doesn't necessarily go over the line, but it does just tiptoe across the line a little bit on what you can and can't really get away with. Obviously there's people getting strangled and mutated, and there's Molotovs being thrown, Scorby gets drowned, there's obviously the grinder with Harrison Chase as well. Mary Whitehouse, she probably lost her shit over it, probably had a heart attack every single episode that she watched. Still kept watching though. But the point is, for me, that level of stuff, like the consequences and the violence, is exactly what I like to see in Doctor Who from time to time. It should be dark. People should die. And sometimes it should be in horrific ways. And I think this story, again, just excels in showing that, and shows that Doctor Who can be a little bit edgy and dark in places. So to go from one story that is a little bit edgy and a little bit dark to one that is arguably the wittiest Doctor Who script ever, which of course is City of Death. Now, City of Death is a story that I don't really hear people talk about it as much now. I think especially back in the day, this was like the ultimate 4th Doctor story. I don't think that's the case now. One thing that really sets City of Death apart is of course the location work, which I believe was the first time that Doctor Who ever went abroad to film a story. I must admit, it does really help, like seeing somewhere other than modern day England or a quarry is a bit refreshing. I like seeing the Doctor and Romana run about Paris. Again, I think in terms of the humorous aspect of Tom, some people would argue, and I think I might as well, that in the latter half of his era, he feels too comedic, and he feels like he's had a little bit too much free reign with the jokes and the quips and stuff, to the point where it gets a little bit distracting and it can sometimes be detrimental to the story. This though, I think he finds the balance perfectly. Again, arguably one of Tom's finest performances. And again, the supporting cast in this story as well, like Julian Glover's in this story, and he's incredible as Scaroth. His head is bigger than what it was before under the mask, apparently, and it does look like green spaghetti with an eyeball. But he's a fantastic villain, and he's an interesting villain as well, which is something that Doctor Who, particularly in the modern era, I don't think has had too many of. This is a guy who, he's not just, I'm going to take over the world and I'm going to do this and blah blah blah, you can't stop me, Doctor. Oh, you've stopped me, fantastic. This is someone who is literally in pieces, and bits of him are in various different points in time. I like when Doctor Who uses time travel, and I think this story really utilises that. I love the experiments that you see with the chicken. I love where the Doctor goes back to try and meet Leonardo da Vinci again and ask him a few questions and everything, and oh, lo and behold, there's another Scaroth. I love the art gallery stuff and how it's linked to the Mona Lisa. I love that this is a fake. Duggan is one of the best supporting characters or one-off appearance characters in Doctor Who's history, in my opinion. I know everyone says that, but come on, there is a reason. The guy doesn't open a bottle of wine by pulling out the cork or just twisting the cap off. He'll just smash it against the bar, because that'll do it. It's just 4 parts of heaven. This is one of those stories that I saw fairly early on into my classic series journey, and it's been one of my favourites ever since. It's one that I will often revisit because I just love it. And again, the music is incredible in this one. I distinctly remember times where I would throw on the soundtrack to this as I was walking about places, and I'd pretend that I'm like the Doctor and Romana running through the streets of, you know, near the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe, the Louvre Gallery and all that sort of stuff. When in actual fact, it was a cold, wet day in Stockport and looked nothing like Paris. Still fun though. And then of course the story that is the obvious story to be on a list like this when we're talking about the 3 best 4th Doctor stories is of course Genesis of the Daleks. For me, this is the ultimate Doctor Who story, and I was asked in my Q&A recently what is one of those must-watch Doctor Who stories that every Doctor Who fan has to see if they want to say that they're a fan. It's this one. It might be the best story in Doctor Who's history. It might be. I'm not saying that for definite, but I think you can make a case for it. It's everything that I love about the early Tom Baker years. And the thing is, it is a little bit misleading because the Daleks don't really feature in this story. It's more about the people of Skaro and Davros and Nyder and the rest of the Kaleds, and the Doctor getting tangled up in all of that, being sent there by the Time Lords, which some may argue, I don't know if this is 100% canon, but some people say, I think including Russell T Davies, that this was like the first act of the Time War, which I think is brilliant. Obviously, the Daleks are not going to be very happy that the Time Lords have sent someone back in time to stop them from existing, because, let's face it, in the end, the Doctor's never going to do it, is he? Some of the most iconic moments and scenes from Doctor Who's entire history are within these 6 parts. And again, going back to what I said about the Seeds of Doom, I think it utilises the time very, very well. Not as good as Seeds of Doom in that aspect, I've got to say. I do feel there is a bit during the middle where it's like you're losing momentum a little bit here, but overall, like, Genesis is a classic Doctor Who story. Michael Wisher acts the shit out of Davros, and he is the ultimate Davros in my opinion. I don't think we've had a better one. I think we've had fantastic actors who played Davros, but this is the Davros performance for me. I just love how grim everything about this story is, like whether it's the horrible, misty, cold wastelands, or whether it's the really bland and dull and military-like bunkers that we're exposed to. I love the fact that the Doctor and Harry get separated from Sarah, so she does one thing and they do the other thing. I love how Tom, as the Doctor, is on fine form yet again. He has some very humorous moments, as always, but when he needs to switch on to the serious stuff, Tom does it incredibly well, and his scenes with Michael Wisher, in particular, are a massive standout in this story. This is the Doctor Who story that I think I like to revisit the most out of any of them. Now, I love a number of stories, and Hand of Fear is still my favourite Tom Baker story, but I just feel a massive urge to watch Genesis once a year, like it's almost like a ritual. Kind of like I do every Christmas. I always, or around Christmas time, I'll watch the Star Wars movies, the original trilogy. Genesis is another story where it's like, okay, it's getting to that time of year again, let's pop it in. This is an almost perfect story. And I never give any story a 10 out of 10. I just never do, because I don't think that anything is perfect or flawless or couldn't be improved in some way, shape or form. That's just the way that my mind works. But if there was one story that would edge very close to a 10, I think it would be this one. But the thing is, with a video like this, I know that there's going to be people out there who are like, what about this story? What about that story? What about Pyramids of Mars? What about Terror of the Zygons, Ark in Space, Horror of Fang Rock, Talons of Weng-Chiang? All these different stories, and if I could include all of them, I would, but unfortunately a top 3 list isn't bigger on the inside, and I can't include more than 3. In the comments below though guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my choices? Do you not? Whatever you think, let me know down below. What would your top 3 Tom Baker stories be? If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always. So if you'd follow me on any of those things, then I'd absolutely love you forever. But until next time guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.